This morning we're going to talk about a line from the workbook, kindness created me kind. I think this is an extremely helpful line to keep in mind as we go through our day. Anytime we're tempted to have an unkind thought about anyone, a critical thought, a mildly judgmental thought, an enraged thought, we should say that line to us, kindness created me kind. And if that's true, then I am substituting my version of that and saying unkindness created me unkind. In other words, I'm a child of the ego instead of a child of God. Because if kindness created me kind, then how could I be unkind? How could I be unkind in my thoughts? How could I be unkind in my words? How could I be unkind in my deeds? And unkindness in the Course, even though it doesn't specifically say this, it's obviously implied throughout. Unkindness in the Course would mean that I may have a kind thought about you or this other person or half a dozen people or 2 million people, but if that kind thought does not embrace all people, it is unkind. It would be an example of what the Song of Prayer would call kindness to destroy. If we are truly being kind, then that kindness must extend to embrace all members of the sonship. Otherwise, it is not kind. And so this statement as a rule of thumb would be very helpful on a very practical way of seeing how it is that I'm continually asserting that my ego is right and God is wrong. And so there's a line in the text which I frequently quote, which says, "And God thinks otherwise." And this comes in the midst of a long discussion of the ego's thought system of murder and battles and war, etc. And then the simple statement appears, "And God thinks otherwise." Well, our ego has a retort to that, all right? That what our ego says, and I think otherwise. And the demonstration that the ego thinks otherwise, that the ego feels that it is wiser than God, that the ego believes that it knows what salvation is for us, namely attack and judgment and criticism, it takes the form of our being unkind. Well, the word kindness itself does not appear all that frequently in the Course. Other words are more frequent, such as gentleness. Nonetheless, kindness is an inherent part of any right-minded behavior or right-minded response. It's inherent in being forgiving. It's inherent in choosing a miracle. It's inherent in choosing vision over judgment. There's a line in the text that says, "Vision or judgment are your choices, but never both of these." In other words, it's always one or the other. We either seek through Christ's vision, which sees all people as the same without exception, or we see through the ego's judgment, which sees everyone as different. And our experiences always act to differentiate among different members of the sonship. And if we could prove through our judgments and our criticisms and our unkind thoughts and unkind words and unkind deeds, if we think of that and we look through those eyes, then we would realize that we are saying the ego's thought system of separation is true, and God's perfect oneness is a lie, and right-minded thinking, which is the reflection of that oneness within the illusion, that's a lie as well. So this helps us look at every single thought we have throughout the day and realize, is this really what I want to make true? Is it really the case that I want to prove that my ego is right and God is wrong? That I'm a child of separation, I'm a child of sin, guilt and fear, attack, judgment, pain, suffering, and death? Or am I a child of love who's learning the daily lessons of forgiveness that will return me home? So if we can continue to say to ourselves, kindness created me kind, and if I'm acting in an unkind way, I am denying the reality of God. And then the question to ask ourselves, is this really what I want? This is a question that we need to ask over and over again. And if we don't ask that question of ourselves throughout the course of the day, it is only because we do not want to return home and we want to prove that God is wrong and we are right. Most students of the Course are familiar with the line that Jesus asks, "Do you prefer that you be right or happy?" To be right means to justify our unkindness. To be happy means that we recognize that even though we are unkind, we don't have to justify it. And we could look at our unkind thoughts and realize that this is simply a defense against the truth. This is kind of an extension of lesson 136. That kindness is a defense against the truth. And why would I want to be a child of an illusion when I can be a child of truth and return home?